Thank you, Andrea. Good morning. Oh, a lot of people made it here. So, yeah, the title, What Again? I was thinking about this being Groundhog's Day, which in case you don't know, this is Groundhog's Day. And as I was thinking about that, I thought it might be kind of fun to do something about Groundhog's Day, because I don't remember anybody ever giving a talk on Groundhog's Day. So here we are. How many of you have seen the old Bill Murray movie called Groundhogs? Oh, good, because this would make no sense to you at all. So for those few of you whose hands didn't go up, well, ask somebody later or go watch the movie. But in the movie, he's trapped in this loop where the same day happens over and over and over and over and over and over again. And it's very confusing, and then it's very frightening, and then it's very frustrating for him, and so on. So I'll get back to the movie in a minute. But have you ever in your life dealt with something, some lesson, spiritual karma, something you've dealt with, and you finally got it figured out? You figured out the lesson, you got done with the addiction, you got done with the situation, you resolved the relation, whatever it was, you did it. You resolved it. And you thought, oh, thank God I'm past this, right? And then, here it comes again. Has anybody ever noticed that besides me? Oh, good, a few, okay. Yeah, so that's like our little spiritual Groundhog Day version, you know, where we're caught in the Bill Murray loop. And so what's going on there? And why does that happen? And I've heard a lot of people who talked about it and wrote about it, and they talk about it being circular or cyclic, that we go through these various phases and various cycles, and then that repeats again. And I don't know how you feel about that, but that's a depressing notion to me. I don't like the idea of going through the same thing over and over and over again. Even reincarnation, when I first heard about it, I don't know how you feel about that, but when I first heard about it, it answered a lot of questions for me. It's like, oh, that makes sense of so many things, about why things happen to people and about getting a second chance on things, and that makes a lot of sense. And then as I studied more about it, and I read many of the teachings, not all of them about it, about how this just endlessly goes on. And that was a depressing thought to me too. So I thought, I'm going to quit studying this stuff. And what I realized is that it's only circular if you look at it in 2 dimensions. If you look at it in 3 dimensions, it's actually a spiral. And so what happens is we come up to a lesson that we need to learn, and we deal with that, and then we do learn from that, and we move on. And life goes on for a while, for a day or a year or 5 years or however long it goes on. And then eventually you come back to that same point, not in the circle, but the same point where you were before, but you're a level higher now, because it's a spiral. And so you've learned something. And now it's like, now given what you've learned about this, here it is again. Now what are you going to do with it? Get the point? And so it's not a way that we're punished or tested. It's a way that we demonstrate to ourselves we've learned something. And if you actually do well in your own estimation with that, based on your internal standards and your internal awareness, if you do well with that, then the next time you come back to that point, there'll be a new lesson, not that one repeating. But if there are layers of that you haven't done yet, then you'll face that same one again. And it's like, well, you did kind of better with this, but you're still, except for the part at the end where you thought, I did really well with everything, and I treated everybody well, and I was very patient, and I was accepting of all this, and I knew it was everybody else's fault that I had to deal with it in the first place. And it's like, oh, you got so close, you know? But it's coming around again. Yeah. So I think that's kind of how the lessons move. And I'm going to tell you a story that may not seem like it relates to you from the Bible, and it's a story it's the kind of story from the Bible that we don't talk about much in here, and many places don't talk about. I don't know if you've noticed this, those of you who do read the Bible, and in case anybody has any doubts, this is founded on that. The spiritual teachings of Jesus, that's what this is founded on. So if you aren't a Bible reader or haven't read it in a long time, I really encourage you to take a look at the book this was all based on, because it's a record of what the teachings were. And if you try to open it up and read it, don't start with the genealogies, because you will never go past that. Like, this is the most boring book I have ever seen. And you won't recognize any of the names or any of the places, and it won't make any, it's like, who cares? But if you want to read the Bible and have difficulty understanding it, there are people here who are good at explaining it and helping you to see what's actually in there. Because part of the problem is it's old, and most of the references don't relate to us anymore. And the other part of the problem is, for those of you who grew up in a traditional fundamentalist Christian church, you've been told so long what everything in there means without you reading it and figuring it out for yourself, that when you look at it, you're going to flip into that understanding, and 9 times out of 10, that's wrong. Or limiting. Sorry to say, but it is. So you need to seek out the truth for yourself in what resonates in your spirit as this is real. And then demonstrate it in your life, which is where you will either prove to yourself, yep, that is real, or, oh, nope, that wasn't either. But that's where you're going to prove it, is how you live it. So this is a story we don't talk about much, because we talk about the things that Jesus did and said that are warm and fuzzy, because they make us feel good. But sometimes he says things that are not so easy or not so comfortable, and those we kind of go, let's not talk about those, because I don't want to think about that. So this is one that has references to it that probably aren't the way you think at all. But here it is. This is from Jesus, not from me. This is in Matthew 12:43. When an unclean spirit is cast out of a man. So how many of you walk through your life thinking about unclean spirits? Maybe some, but probably not a lot, because it's like not sophisticated to do that. When an unclean spirit comes out of a man, it roams through waterless places, looking for rest, but cannot find any. So it says, I'll go back to that house I came from, meaning the person. And upon returning, it finds the house vacant and swept and cleaned out and put in order. And so it brings with it 7 other spirits worse than itself. And they live in that person and settle there. That's a bad day. That's a real bad day. This is the voice of somebody who might have experienced that. I know that voice because I've experienced that. As a result, the man's condition now is worse than it was at first. That's how it goes with evil. So, as I said, we probably don't think in those terms today. So I'm going to put it in different terms, but it's the same principle. If you have a habit, an emotional habit, a thinking habit, a perspective habit, a reactive habit, if you have a habit that is not healthy, that is not good for you or the people around you, a habit that's destructive, a habit that's mean, a habit that's fearful, and you think, I'm just going to get rid of that habit. I'm going to deny that I have it. I'm not going to pay any attention to it. I'm just going to cast that out. And I'm going to be done with it. You're like the person that the unclean spirit goes out of, because what have you replaced that with? Nothing. It doesn't work. I'm just telling you. You'll think you got rid of that. But as soon as you come around to another challenge again, because there's no new pattern that has replaced the old one, what you will do is react with the old pattern. And you will re-energize it and give it life again. And so you'll react in the same negative way, in the same problematic way, in the same emotional way, in the same way of thinking. See, things never work out for me. One of Andrea's favorite phrases, by the way, of mine, he doesn't know this, is, things always just work out for me. Is that true or not? I mean, you see you, don't you? Yeah, yeah. And doesn't it often work out that way? See? So, but there are people, and some of you might be among them, who have the opposite saying, what's going to go wrong now? And you know what? It does. Doesn't it? Yeah. That's the cycle that Yeshua is talking about. And the idea is, when he healed somebody, if you read the stories carefully, even when they were talking in terms of demons, when he cast them out, he put them someplace that they wouldn't do harm, and he filled the space in the person with faith in God. There was no empty space left when he did healing. What was left was full. And it was full of love, it was full of peace, it was full of self-acceptance, and it was full of gratitude. It was now full. So if any of those things came back, there wasn't room in the house. You follow me? In the Gospel of John, it says, perfect love casts out fear. If your house is full of love, fear has a real hard time entering. If your house is empty and dark, fear is very much at home there. And it will take root. And the first time you see a weed in your garden, and it's this big, it comes out pretty easy. You let it grow for a couple months, and some of them don't come out real easy at all. So I think that's what Jesus was talking about, was we need to do that. And we talk here, one of our, I don't know, if we look at some of the things, we say a lot of things every week, like the Christ candle thing. We have a little statement up, our mission is to create and sustain a culture that supports spiritual awakening and transformation. You can't transform if you stay the same. I don't know if it's true or not, but they quote Henry Ford as saying, if you always do what you always did, you're always going to get what you always got. Or the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing and think you're going to get a different result. When we're working on things in ourselves that have become obstacles to us, and sometimes, by the way, these aren't just negative emotions or negative behavioral patterns or negative thought modes. Sometimes the things we're working on that now are spiritual obstacles to us are spiritual beliefs. Sometimes what becomes a spiritual obstacle to us is a spiritual belief that we have held a long time, that is emotionally important to us and is false. And we've come to know that it's false. And then we have to let go of that one. And that's not always easy to do. Some of those beliefs are in there pretty deep. But if we're really committed to transformation, into what? Into the image of Christ, into the image and likeness of God that we are, being transformed into that. In the Bible, in the beginning, it says an interesting thing, man is made in the image and likeness of God. Now that's an interesting thing, I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but why are both of those necessary? Why doesn't it just say in the image of God? Why doesn't it just say in the likeness of God? Aren't they kind of the same anyway? Is that just redundancy? Why do they say both things? Well, here's a thought. What if we're made in the image of God, meaning that that divine essence is in us? It's us. That's who we are. We have the indelible image of God in us as who we are. But whether or not we are like God depends on our choices. We have and are the image of God. We become the likeness of God when we act like it. So I think that's what this story of Yeshua is all about. So I'm going to go back to the movie now. So in the movie, he's trapped in this ever-repeating cycle. And if you look at his character, or if you remember the movie, he's a very jaded, unhappy, bitter guy. Wouldn't you say? Yeah. You might have other adjectives, but those are kind of the ones I think of when I think of it. And everything is like ho-hum, And he's a reporter, and he's reporting on Groundhog's Day in Punxsutawney, Philadelphia, or Pennsylvania, and with the groundhog film. And he could care less about that, but it's part of his job, so he's supposed to make this exciting, and he's really bored to tears, and he can't wait to get out of there. And instead, he's trapped there and lives that day over and over and over and over and over again. And sometimes the place you hate, that you just can't wait to get out of because you have so much hate for it, is where you're stuck. And do you know what stuck you there? Your hate for it. So he hates it, and he's stuck, and it plays over and over and over and over again. And eventually, while the circumstances of the day stay the same, something changes. He decides to start learning something from the situation. He takes piano lessons. Maybe he could play that awesome song that Cindy played. He learns how to play piano. He ends up playing in a little jazz quartet there. He ends up learning how to do things. He helps people who are in trouble. He starts making a difference in the space that he is. Because he's got nothing else to do. He tries to kill himself too, and he's successful. He kills himself multiple times. And then he wakes up the next day and lives the same day over. That doesn't work. Yeah. It doesn't work for you either. You can't get away from you by not being you. You can't do it. So he tries to start learning, so he figures out, I'm just stuck here forever anyway, and it's really boring and I hate it. So I may as well start learning something from the environment. And he makes connections with the people in that world. He connects to the waitress. He connects to the piano teacher. He connects to the lonely old gal. He connects to people, and he starts learning something from them. And the circumstances still don't change, but he starts changing. And isn't that the way it usually works in your life? You have to change before your circumstances will. And eventually, something else changes, and then one day he wakes up and it's a different day. And he's free. What was the last thing that had to change before he got free of that day? He had to love somebody. He fell in love. And the love that he had for that woman changed everything. Because actually caring about somebody other than himself is what freed him. All of the spiritual teachings, that many of which are popular in our current culture, of it's all about me, it's all about me, it's all about me, it's all about me. What do I get? How do I get enlightened? How do I get free? How do I get to God? How do I do this? Me, 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 and then they're frustrated. Part of the reason they're frustrated is because it, in fact, is only partly about you. It's about the God in you, which is connected to everybody else. It can't be just about me. Or it's not about God. Because where isn't God? Who isn't God in? So when I start accepting that it's bigger than I understand, that there are things I don't understand, but that voice in me of the divine love of God, that voice of love in me, when I listen to that, that's where I get my freedom. When I'm actually willing to be loving, when I open up to that. So if you watch this character's transformation in the movie, he goes from this arrogant kind of SOB who's upset with everything and everybody's stupid and a big problem for him. He goes from that to actually being humble and realizing people have value and trying to help them and learning from them, things that they know that he doesn't. So gee, has humility ever been a spiritual concept any great teachers have taught before? He actually transforms in that way. He actually starts learning from the place he is that he couldn't stand before. And suddenly it's not such a bad place. The places that we're at in our lives, in our relationships, in our jobs, in our communities, in our church, places that we are uncomfortable in, places where we have to be around people we don't particularly like, things that are difficult for us to deal with. If we did that transformation and started doing the Bill Murray thing of maybe there's something I could learn from these people, maybe there's somewhere I could help these people, just the idea of opening up to that possibility changes things. And then most important of all, the willingness to actually love and be vulnerable. That's another piece of, in terms of willingness, is if you wanted to find a life partner that you really loved and who really loved you, but you were unwilling to change anything about your life whatsoever, you were unwilling to change anything in your house whatsoever, you were unwilling to change your schedule whatsoever, and they never were allowed to do anything that upset you or didn't agree with what you wanted, how successful do you think you would be in finding that partner? Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it? But I'm telling you what, I used to do that, and I have known plenty of people who still do. And then they say to me, I just can't find somebody. And I said, you don't want anybody. You want the illusion of somebody, not the real person. And what you have is that. You have the illusion, but you don't have the reality. So I think the key in this movie that set him free was when he actually was able to love. And I think that's our freedom, when we actually can do that. And I think that's what all the teachers are telling us in one way or another, is it gets down to that. It gets down to, are we open to that love and responsive to it, or are we not? And the last piece is, if I love someone, if I love my wife, but I say I do, but I am unwilling to let her see me when I'm weak. I'm unwilling to let her see me when I'm upset. I'm unwilling to be there for her when she is upset or sick or ill, because it's unpleasant. I'll just come back when you're in a good mood, thanks. I don't know how much we'd see of each other. but no, you get my point though. The love requires vulnerability to the beloved. If that isn't present, love really isn't present. And not only does that work between husband and wife and friend and church and community, it works between my soul and God too. I say I want God in my life, but I'm not vulnerable to letting God in. I say I want God's guidance in my life, but I'm not willing to listen to any of his direction. Most of what we do not have spiritually is not because it has not been given. It is because we will not take it. So, in Kabbalah, there's a story about this great teacher and a student who wanted to learn all the secrets of Kabbalah. So, which Kabbalah, by the way, the word in Hebrew means to receive. That's what it means. And so this teacher and student get together. The student finally gets to this great teacher, and he says, I want to know all the mysteries, all the secrets of God, all the essence of Kabbalah. I want to receive that. And the master said, okay. And so he picks up the apple and he said, this has all the secrets. And once you have this, it'll begin to open up to you. So the master has this apple, and the student says, that's great. And he goes and starts to grab the apple, and the master pulls it back. He said, well, what? And he said, no, you're not ready. Come back in a month. So he comes back in a month, and he says, okay, I'm really ready, I'm really ready. And so the master pulls out the apple, and the student starts to grab it again, and the master says, nope, not yet. Takes it back again. This goes on for a while. And eventually, after a period of time, the student comes back, and he says, do you still want this? And he said, I do. And he puts out his hands like this. And the master places the apple in his hands. You can't take it from God. You have to receive it. And that requires us to be willing to transform and to be willing to be open and to be willing to love. And if we do those three things, then that which we're seeking is going to be unfolding for us. It just will. That's just how the design works. But if you continue to close, if you continue to be unwilling and continue to refuse to be open to love, then you can't get what you want. And you will suffer as long as it takes you until you go, you know what? Tired of this. I surrender. Give up. Not give up as in quit, but I give up in terms of resisting. So I'm going to do just a little song for you, and then we'll do a short meditation. And for those of us who experience Groundhog Day every now and then, let's remember that there's a way out. The way out is to learn from where we are, to serve where we are, and to be willing to love. That's the way out. Alrighty. So this is I didn't think to write a song about Groundhog's Day, so this is not about Groundhog's Day. This is just a song. It's called Over Time. It goes like this. Over time I've learned, no matter what I'm feeling, that the truth of life is never-ending being, and I think it's time I let go. In my darkest hours, when fear is overwhelming, there is still a light deep within me glowing, and I know that light is you. On the wings of love, our souls can fly over the deepest of nights. There is such relief in knowing we're forgiven, and I find such peace when love is what I'm living. I'd have been so lost without you. On the wings of love, your soul and mine, living as one beyond time. Over time I've learned so thanks. So let's take a moment of quiet. just for a moment, take a look at those places in your life where you feel trapped. Maybe in a particular relationship, maybe a particular job, particular economic situation, a particular health challenge, whatever it may be. There's lots of places we get stuck. Take a look at one or more of those places that are really troubling you right now, where you just feel in the groundhog loop. And see if you don't notice in those places resistance in you. Resistance because it's not the way you think it should be. Resistance because it feels unfair. Resistance because you feel helpless. Resistance because you're afraid. Resistance because you're ticked off. Resistance because you're not appreciated. Whatever form it may take. And invite the Spirit of the living God into that very place. And ask for that Spirit to reveal to you how to care about that situation and others in it. How to make someone else in that situation feel a little better. How to open yourself in that situation to being willing to love and to be loved. And to be willing to lay down the resistance. And be present. And hold out your hands to receive what God has to give you. Worry less about getting out than getting open. Lord, help us to realize that the Spirit that worked in Jesus, in Moses, in the prophets, in the great saints and teachers of all time, that same essence is in me, in you, in all of us. Give it voice. Let it come forth in our life. So that we may, as Jesus said, open the eyes of the blind, including our own. Open the ears of the deaf, including our own. And set free the captives from their prison. Because this is a good year from the Lord. Yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Thank you all.